And this is by far the youngest slide projector I've ever had, and it's wonderful. The one I've been working is about 40 years old, and it finally stopped. A disclaimer, I am not an expert on Haitian women. This is based on my observations. My observations are skewed by the fact that I'm a white American that doesn't understand a whole lot of the language and has to depend on interpreters. My daughter lived there for 2 years. And so she speaks the language, and she's had a great deal more interaction with people in various aspects of life there. So with that disclaimer, I'll tell you what I think I know. And let's see here. Okay, let's start you off with Haiti is really beautiful, okay? And this is Bougainvillea. Like you have to go to the Lutheran Botanical Garden to see up here. Just a few basic facts. The population is thought to be about 8 to 9 million people. There was to be a census in 2010. For obvious reasons, the earthquake prevented the taking of an orderly census. I don't know when it's going to be done. It's estimated that 80% of the people live below the poverty level, and poverty level as designated by people who look at goods and services and whether you're able to afford a basic level of life. 50% are estimated to be undernourished. Not starving, but undernourished. The literacy rate among the young people, that is under 30, is approximately 66%. Among the older people, it's much less. Even those who've gone to school 40 and 50 years ago, since there is very little in the way of reading materials, they tend to lose their skills. They can't read at a level that would allow them to function in society. 30% are without a reliable year-round source of water. And so you find women and children mainly responsible for getting water, sometimes walking several hours to bring back a 5-gallon bucket of water for the family's use, and that goes on day after day, especially in the dry season. It's estimated that 60% of people who have water do not have clean water, do not have access to clean water. And I think the cholera epidemic and how easily it's spread by poor sanitary facilities and poor sources of water only illustrates the fragility of the health of those people. Chronic diarrhea, recurrence of typhoid, and stomach ulcers, which are spread by waterborne bacteria, are very common down there long before there was any cholera to deal with. Now, women do not exist in a vacuum, as we all know. And the second thing is everything is interconnected, and so it's kind of hard to make this perfectly coherent. This is a typical house in the countryside. The walls are usually made of sticks, saplings, coated with dirt or stucco, a little cement mixed in if you have it. This is a tin roof, but there are a lot of people who plate banana leaf roofs, which work well, but they're fragile. Banana leaf roof lasts maybe 5 years. A tin roof will last 10 to 20 years, and is more easily patched. Most of my experience is in the countryside, and in Port-au-Prince you can have quite affluent people, quite modern houses, some infrastructure, Out in the country, you drop back 100 or more years. The land is very rocky, as you see, and people live with rocks, kick them to the side, pile them up, grow things in between rocks. It's partly a volcanic mountain. There are some places where you can actually see volcanic spires and lava sticking up. This is up in the higher lands where there are more trees. This is the road up along the coast, and this is the dry side of the hill, and you can see that there are cactuses growing. It can be extremely dry. This is a city. I can't tell you which one exactly. They all share in common kind of a French-type architecture. There are places in Jacmel that look very much like New Orleans and vice versa. Life is kind of lived on the street there. As you travel through a city like this, you'll see a roadside bicycle repair shop, and there in the space between the building and the nearest car running by, there'll be a series of bicycles. There'll be tires, spokes, and they'll fix your bicycle right there with the traffic rumbling by. Business tends to be small and not on a large scale, even in the cities. This is another view, and I think you can notice that there's a street vendor probably selling used clothes and shoes, and this is Jacmel. You'll notice the unfinished building here with building materials up on the second balcony. The place seems to be in a constant state of being torn down and repaired. There are no loans, so you buy your building materials as you can and then build. But there's no mortgages. So that does hold back that any kind of development and building by an individual or a small business on a large scale. Okay, now we get up into the mountains, and here are the people standing in line at the spring for water. And you'll notice there's a pipe there and there. Some agency has come and capped off the spring so that the mules don't stand in the spring and relieve themselves in the spring, so that you don't have the dogs playing in the water, you don't have the kids playing in the water and defecating in the water. That hopes to keep the water less grossly contaminated, but I can tell you we've done cultures, and even the water that comes from this mountain spring, which is very reliable and is considered essential to this area, is heavily contaminated with coliform bacteria from intestines. It's porous ground. The toilets are pit toilets, and so the bacteria wash into the water supply. This is a typical village house. This is actually one of the more affluent ones. It's got a cement floor. It's got a couple of doors, and it has a nice front porch. And people do a lot of their living on the front porch. There's a lot of visiting back and forth. People carry on their businesses such as sewing on the front porch because the light is better there. This particular village that we're at does not have electricity. So there is one business that has a generator, which they use to power some power tools, and they have a side business of charging your cell phone.
Nice.
Cell phones have come to Haiti within the last 7 or 8 years. A company called Digicel, which is Caribbean-based, has put towers up, and now communication is possible among a lot of places. We didn't have cell phone until last year when the Vietnamese company set up a cell tower that actually reached the little town of Woodbury, which is up in the mountains. We're about 4,000, 4,500 feet. I'm going to go on with some stuff that I just don't have slides to illustrate, but these are our sisters carrying their laundry back from the laundry stream. Now, Haiti has problems common to most third world countries. They have a colonial legacy with a history of extremely cruel slavery and oppression. And as I'll allude to later on, there is a sense of identification with the oppressor. Those people who are descended from the Creoles, that is the mixture of white and African, are considered, have long been the tradesmen, the businessmen, the educated class, and do hold most of the business, large businesses and concessions. The natural resources were exploited early on, and the deforestation of Haiti is one of the island's ecologic disasters. When Haiti achieved its independence from France, they were required to pay some exorbitant amount of tribute to France to, I guess, indemnify France for their loss. And that was the last payment made in 1970. That was 170 years of payments. The mahogany forests were cut down to provide that money in some. That's kind of what was behind a lot of that. It's a poor country. They don't have a tremendous number of resources. They have a large population, and again, things are interconnected. There's not a good, social safety net. Now, on paper, there is Social Security, there are unemployment rules, there are widows' pensions, but in actual fact, the people that are supposed to be paying often do not pay it in. The bureaucracy required to get your payment is often extremely difficult for somebody living in a remote area who isn't terribly literate for them to access that. One of the things is one of your safety nets is children. You have children to care for you in your old age. And in a lot of underdeveloped countries, 4, 5, and 6 or more children are very common. A lot of these children don't live beyond age 1 or 2. Those that do are going to support you in your old age. So the social and economic necessity of having a large number of children adds to the population problem. It's a very heavily Catholic country, and the Catholic Church in Haiti, as well as everywhere else, is very adamant that the only way of controlling population is saying no. And it works about as well there as it does here. Now, the overpopulation and the lack of opportunity for educated people has led to a huge diaspora to many countries in the world, France and Canada being the most common. The United States, of course, has a very large number of Haitian immigrants over the last 40 to 50 years. And of course, those people don't come back to live. They don't bring, a lot of them do not bring the knowledge they have gained either by education or just by experience in the more developed countries. They don't bring it back. There was a movement to invest in Haiti by Haitian businessmen abroad, which was taking place during 2008 and 2009, and a lot of that crumbled beneath the earthquake. I don't know how it's going in terms of reinvesting in terms of tourism. Tourism is one of the things because of the beautiful country, the climate, the coral reefs, is one of the things they were working on prior to the earthquake. The educational system as it stands now is not very good. There are a couple of things. Does it bother you that I've got the lights off while I'm talking? Okay. There's a national curriculum. So whether you're going to private school or to a parochial school or to a national school, the curriculum is the same. Very much your level of affluence depends on whether you can afford a private or a parochial school, and whether you can afford books. And in our village, there's a lot of children who attend the Catholic school because it's considered to be better than the national school. And I'll say that every now and then I said, why are all these children around here? Shouldn't they be in school? And somebody says, well, they go to the national school, but it's not on today. The teacher didn't show up. The teachers are poorly paid, they're not supervised, there's no accountability, and they don't show up. In a private or Catholic school, there's just a little bit more pressure to show up and do your job, but it's heavily dependent, at least in the village, on rote memory. And my daughter said that, yeah, this is one of the criticisms that her husband and one of her friends down there, who was a lawyer with the foundation, both of them Haitian, said that it was just very discouraging to them that innovation wasn't rewarded. You were discouraged from any kind of independent thinking and thinking outside the box, as we like to say. You don't get any credit for that. It's a very set routine, and I think we can appreciate where that might be a problem in developing your country, developing your status. And we all know that the infrastructure has been poor, and part of that is corruption. You can build a building and get it certified by paying money rather than having the engineer say, the engineer will certify for a certain amount of money rather than really making sure that the building is built according to specifications. And we remember that a school in Haitianville is considered a ritzy suburb of Port-au-Prince. Fell down in the time before the earthquake. It was the school fell down, a lot of loss of life of children. And it came out that they had just added story upon story to the existing building until the bottom crumbled. And that is one of the problems that so many buildings were lost during the earthquake, with a great deal of loss of life. One of the other problems with the country is that all the development seemed to be concentrated in Port-au-Prince and in a couple of other cities, mainly Port-au-Prince. So when the earthquake devastated Port-au-Prince, all the schools of higher learning that tended to concentrate in Port-au-Prince were lost. They're now back at work, but there was a great loss of life of teachers. The universities, medical schools, nursing schools, agronomy schools, you name it, were brought down in the space of a few minutes. And a lot of people indeed go to school in the evening. A man that translates for us was in law school during the earthquake, and he kind of rode the building to the ground and managed to crawl out, but he was on the top floor, and so he wasn't crushed like so many people were on the lower floor. The daughter of my daughter's housekeeper in Haiti had a daughter going to university in Port-au-Prince, and she was in the classroom, and they ran out with the earthquake, And she realized that her laptop was in the school. And went in, grabbed her laptop, and just as she got out the door, the whole building collapsed. I mean, that was just one of the good ending stories. A lot of them did not end that well. About 250,000 people, maybe more, and I don't think that anybody will ever have accurate statistics, perished in that earthquake. And so a lot of educated people, a lot of people who were leaders of the country died in that, because all of that was concentrated in Port-au-Prince, which is on soft ground. Port-au-Prince, it's on soft ground that is washed out toward the bay of Port-au-Prince. And Haiti hasn't had a great and stable government over the last 30 years or so. They've had a lot of shifts of government over the years. When the so-called Pop Doc took power and ruled as an absolute dictator with his private army called the Tom which essentially terrorized people. That was a long area of stagnation and stasis. When his son Baby Doc took power, there was a lot of popular unrest. The United States sent Baby Doc to a happy life on the Riviera, and there were several governments. Then Aristide was elected and overthrown, and then re-elected, and then overthrown and transported by the U.S. to Central African Republic. So the United States has had a relationship with Haiti. Mostly it has had to do with kind of telling Haiti what to do and enforcing that with the army. We invaded in 1915, and sometime, I can't tell you when, sometime in the 1990s, there was an American invasion. 1990s, it was to keep peace. Now, so here we have women in this milieu, and as in every society, I think women suffer more. It's a Mediterranean-derived society. You know, the French haven't solved their problems of male domination and sexual harassment of women. And this is part of the legacy of France, to some extent. I told you that people kind of identify with their oppressors to some extent. If you look at the billboards, if you look at the posters put out by the Catholic Church, which promote abstinence, you look at the ads on the back of buses, you do not see black women. You see Beyonce. Coffee a la women with caramel-colored hair, curves like Haitian women do not have. Haitian, the voluptuousness that is considered American, and it's used to sell beer and toothpaste and cell phones and anything you can imagine. This, of course, is akin to the idea that body image. You know, if you aren't a Europeanized woman, you're not desirable. And I'm sure that is internalized by both sexes. Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. I just don't know what to do. Maybe in the back? Oops, I guess it doesn't work that way.
That's the last one. And then you've got one, you take that one off, the one that goes across the front.
Yeah.
That's gonna
Okay.
kill your picture.
I do have some slides here, folks, but I just kind of want to get a context here. They're not, as in the United States, there's a wide range of differences in wealth and in living styles. In Port-au-Prince, you can see young women and middle-aged women and men in the latest fashions, driving the latest cars, talking on the cell phone with the Rolex watch, and all of that kind of stuff. And then you can go to the slums of Port-au-Prince, where people from the country have come down trying to eke out a living, who live in absolute misery on land that's easily flooded, in cardboard and tin shacks, with not much to eat, and there's malnourishment, disease, and the worst of the slums. My experiences with the rural poor, and they're mostly poor up there. Although some of them are considered more wealthy, somebody who has an income or a job and has a house that is substantial. And I haven't done a lot of planning around in the village because of some problems with my knees, but my son has been all over the village, and he says, there could be the poorest little house living right next to a wealthy house, that people live mixed in. There are no gated communities in our little town. The young men are given preference in education. I think all of our interpreters have been men who are going to school in Port-au-Prince. They take time off from their studies in order to provide interpreter services and make some money. If you can get $50 a day as an interpreter, that'll help pay your school. And so a lot of men who have got some proficiency in English will do that, and that's the one thing. And they're all of them working desperately to get an education. Not that there's going to be jobs commensurate with their education. Our interpreter who finished law school and passed his exams and is now certified as a lawyer is still working as a policeman, although he's moved into the domestic violence division, because that's the area he wants to do law in. But he doesn't have the money to start practice, there's no one to pay him. And so he is underemployed, as are many women who are educated as nurses and teachers. But there's just a lot of, because it's not a very developed country, you can get an education, but there has to be a job for you, and we're seeing that here too. Okay, let me go on to a few slides here. Housework at the village level and among the poorer women of the city is really on a primitive level. Washing clothes is a communal thing because there is a stream. They all get together, wash clothes, and then pile the clean clothes on their head and walk home uphill. Cooking. This is the school. This is the school kitchen. The food is usually donated. That sack says U.S. AID on it, I believe. The blue cans are of soybean oil, and the cooking is done on precious wood in iron pots. And these are fortunate women. They have a job cooking for the school lunch. The lunch is rice and beans with vegetables. Their meat is a treat in this rural village. There are chickens for eggs, there are a few pigs, there are some goats, but meat is still considered quite a treat and used only for special occasions. This is a view of the main street in the town, and this is market day, so there's a lot of people here visiting, buying provisions, selling produce and things. This woman here is selling cabbage and that's some kind of greens up there along the right side. She is fortunate enough to have a donkey. The donkey carries the stuff in for her and she'll ride it home. Another view of market, and you see the gentleman with his umbrella in one hand and his rooster in the other hand. Cockfights are very common there. It's and there are rings, there's betting, there's much shouting. The birds fight until someone decides that this one is the winner. They don't fight to the death, as I understand they do in the United States. It's not quite the bloody sport it is in the United States, but they do set the birds on one another. This is a woman in a city, and we sat watching her for about an hour or two while negotiations were made for souvenirs that we were bringing back home. And she spent the afternoon cooking food, and then she moved across to where the wall was, and people coming home from work would get one of her metal pans. She would serve them up food they could eat on the way home from their job. And then, and this is while she was watching the children. And at one point, while the stuff was cooking, she was also washing clothes. The next morning when we came by, she was doing the same thing with breakfast. She was serving breakfast food to people on their way to work. And this may be my last. It's a beautiful country. It's Caribbean. It's got lovely clouds. It's got rain. It's got thunder. It's got and as we all know, it's got hurricanes. But there are a tremendous number of problems, and I don't have the answer. I'm not finished talking yet, but we'll turn on some light here. And you can turn that, leave the fan on, but you can turn it. Thanks. Okay, one of the things that plagues Haiti is and especially women, is the low status of women. It's estimated that in the best of times, 40% of the women experience domestic violence. Now, whether this is shouting or shoving or beatings, we're talking across the board. But recently, in the last 2 years, with tent cities and gangs and all that, they estimate something like 70% of the women in these tent cities and displaced housing areas have been raped. It's a huge problem, and there are various organizations that kind of help women to make protective societies, but again, it's just brutality. And if a woman or a young girl is not with another group, she stands a good chance of being raped, even if there's several women together, sometimes at gunpoint or any point. So it's in this massive displacement, it's almost doubled in incidence. We saw the women who were contributing to family income, selling the produce of their land, or things that they have bought. There are a lot of women who are called timachan, which means merchants, small merchants. And they will, some of them will travel to the Dominican Republic, buy a bale of clothing, bring it back on a bus, sort through it, and prepare it for sale and sell it. Or they'll have a food stand. There are women who carry baskets, or some of them actually carry small tables on their head, and then they'll set up along the street side and sell. The one woman that I had a chance to kind of talk with through our interpreter, she sold hair bows, hairpins, shampoo, brushes, combs, things like that. And she walked along and until she found a place to set up, and she set it. But her, and she was starting to fix hair. Remember, we just sit on the little chair and she would start. And her dream was to have a shop in the front of her own home. But the lending practices down there are very, very, make it very, very difficult. The poor can't get a bank loan. And the smaller lenders who will lend to the small merchants exact an exorbitant amount of interest, something like a 50%.
Oh my gosh.
Interest. And so you never can get ahead. You can barely keep up and barely feed your family. One of the things that I see as a sign of hope is an organization called Frank Jose, and they are a microcredit union. They were formed with help from the Grameen Bank, and they cater, I can't say they cater, but they involve mostly women, because women are used to working together, whether it's in childcare or washing or gardening, and so they find that women can work together, and they will make small loans to members, and the interest is like 15%, which is considered wonderful in Haiti. And of course, since you are borrowing from your close peers, they're not going to lend you something that they don't think is going to, for something they think is not going to work. And you feel honor bound to keep your commitment. That was and that's been a big organizing tool, because you do not have a sense of what goes into democracy unless you've done it. If somebody comes in and says, I'm from the United States, and let me tell you how democracy works, that doesn't seem to really stick. Whereas if people have sat around, they've discussed, they've voted, they've worked on a project, they've seen the fruits of the project, that seems to stick. And what Haiti needs is the feeling of more people than just the top layer actually working for change and effecting change. The earthquake killed 4 Haitian women who had been active since the 70s and 80s, which is when the women's movement in Haiti began to take off, to I'm sure, communicate with the women's movement around the world. A woman who had founded a domestic violence shelter, and a movement against domestic violence. Miriam Berlet, the chief of the Ministry for Gender and the Rights of Women, so she was a cabinet level woman. Anne-Marie Carolon, who in 2006 managed to, in the parliament, get the crime of rape changed from it's a passionate crime, we've seen this in our society, to a genuine out-and-out crime. And Marie Mireille Neptune, who is an author on women's conditions in Haiti, and widely read, widely brings that information to Haiti. So, again, in the earthquake, there were a number of women leaders lost, and who knows how long it will take another generation to get that, to get the experience and build on what their sisters started. So, not a terribly happy, but there is movement. It's harder to see in the countryside, because when you're working 16 hours a day to keep the roof over the head and the wash done and the children, there just isn't a lot of leisure. So I don't think we see that in the fact that I can't really participate much because I don't understand it. We've had meetings of the water committee, and the men like to take over the entire meeting. Likewise, when we have our health committee meeting, the men want to take over the health committee meeting, and the women tend to hang back until we say, well, we need to know what Ms. Rode means. We need to see what Ms. Jean-Pierre thinks about this type of thing. And I don't know if that makes any difference, but I've observed that, and we're there for a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Did you do any medical work?
Oh, yeah, yeah. In this little village, it's been an evolution over the years, you know. The first time we show up, you know, we're all gung-ho. And yeah, there are a few emergencies where I think we maybe have made a difference. But for the most part, there's a lot of chronic disease. There's diabetes, there's hypertension, there's a lot of stomach-related problems, probably related to the bad water. There's diseases based on malnutrition. There's diseases based on alcoholism. The drinking of illegal booze called clarine is a real problem. More common among men than among women, or at least we think. But those are chronic problems. They're a matter of education. They're a matter of and chronic disease. The treatment of chronic disease is something that just doesn't register with the village people. Mm-hmm. You know, they're used to being sick, and so you go to the various irregular practitioners, and finally, when you're really at death's door, you come to the clinic, and there's nothing that can be done. We've had patients die in our clinic, mm-hmm. And they were in the last stages of heart failure, mostly. But we do have a nurse there now, and again, nurses vary a great deal. We had one nurse who had done a lot of experience in the countryside, working with mobile medical teams, and had taught herself a great deal. And she was quite confident. People respected her. The one we have now is young. She's not terribly experienced, and so she's not aggressive in getting people in for treatment and in pursuing various things. But we do have an ongoing clinic. The parish has renovated the building, and we pray that they renovated it so it doesn't fall over on us. And we do work with our nurse. I do eye stuff in the church, which tends to be kind of dark. Why? Eye doctors creep around in the dark.
Oh, okay, so that's good.
Yeah, yeah. And we do what we can. I'm hoping we're making something of a difference. We're trying to get encourage our nurse. There is a small hospital with a doctor and a clinic about 10 miles away, and they are able to handle much more than we can handle. But the idea is to consult the nurse, get to the hospital before you are so ill that you're going to die, before you even get there.
How often do you go to Haiti, and how long have you been doing this? And what you mentioned, it's with the church.
The group I go with is a very small group that started at St. Mark's in Peoria, and we've since branched out. We've got people of practically every faith that goes with us at varying times. Most are from the Peoria area, but not all. And we've been going since 1999. And we try to have 2 missions a year. We don't always succeed. I've been on other missions, helping out with the eye. One of my mentors down there is a woman who's an internist, and she said the best thing you can do for Haiti is to teach the physicians, teach the Haitian physicians. So that's what I've been trying. That's what I've been trying to do whenever I can. It's fine for me to sit and tell people they need to take these drops, mm-hmm. but if the Haitian physician that they seek out for eye care doesn't know how to do some basic exams and procedures, then or doesn't know the results of the latest studies, then that's not benefiting the greatest number of people. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And when my daughter was living in Jeremy, I would go down and visit her whenever I was down there, and usually I could connect with an eye clinic down there.
What sort of volunteers would your group need for the missions?
We can use just about anybody. You don't have to have a medical degree. You know, one's health has to be fairly decent if you need constant medical monitoring, which at your age I imagine is rather rare, but decent health. If you can walk rough terrain, that's even better. It's much more fun if you can get around, and there's a lot of things that we've had people who don't have any particular medical training, and they've done crowd control, the counting of pills, taking people where they need to go, kind of scouting the crowd for people who really look sick, and going on the water project, which involves visiting houses, seeing how people are using their various water filters, and always having a glass of water there. So, you know, because, and indeed, we drink water from the filtration systems that we've introduced into the village. We stay in the parish rectory, which is kind of like living at summer camp. And their water filtration system is the same one that we've introduced to the village. And most of the time we do okay.
Having lived out in a rural area with outhouses in my past, I would think people don't know that you need to keep the outhouse so many yards away from any water source, or?
Well, this is all mountainside, okay, and water flows downhill. And when they have rain, this is very porous, it's sandy, rocky soil, so it's not quite like the outhouses we have, which is percolating through clay. I think that's probably at least part of it, because they do dig outhouses, they do line them, they do use them. I would say that I've never been anywhere in the village where I smelled human feces or urine. Every now and then you see donkey, but or pig or bird poop, but I think people are extremely careful with using the outhouses properly.
Got it, that makes more sense.
But it's all downstream, you know. Your water source is downstream.
And porous, that's
Yeah.
So people have just developed resistance to the bacteria to some extent?
Well, I imagine that you know, you do reach some sort of an equilibrium or you die. There's a lot of parasites down there. A lot of the children run around without shoes. So there's chronic anemia, chronic malnutrition, because the parasites absorb the food that the children eat. We try to systematically, anybody who comes to the clinic gets a dose of warm medicine. And we tried to. Pardon?
How long will that last?
Until they run around barefoot again. But we also try to emphasize shoes. That the reason for what the reason is for wearing the shoes. We've got a lot of posters, and we have our health agents who actually, while people are waiting to see the doctor, they'll go over the poster, which shows, you know, not defecating where it can be picked up, or not letting the children play where the pigs roam. You know, the mother handling the baby and then patting out bread, and then, you know, everybody eating the bread and everybody squatting because they're sick, because they've been transmitted, the disease has been transmitted. There's a lot of teaching posters along that line, and so we try to incorporate those into the teaching as people wait to see the doctor. But yeah, there's a lot of chronic problems down there, and you know, if you're spending time with stomach pain, diarrhea, your productivity is, as well as your quality of life, is drained.
How do you think the mood is among the people in general? I mean, that's a very grim picture. I have a son whose theory is the poorer the countries, the happier the people.
Well,
That
I
the
don't
rich
know
countries
about
are
the
very
happier the
unhappy.
people, but they do know how to enjoy life. Visiting is a big thing. It's cheap. And everybody seems to be related. It's like one big family. And on a Sunday afternoon, for instance, people are up and down the street visiting all the time. At church, the mass is like 2 to 3 hours long, depending on how much singing and dancing. And as everybody's leaving after 3 hours, the choir is still singing, and people are visiting, and it's a much slower pace of life. It's nice. I do enjoy it. Weddings are a big thing. And other parties. There's not a whole lot of I don't know what the word in the village, at least. There's not a whole lot of excess. You can see excess in Port-au-Prince, prints with big cakes and all the trappings that are imported from the United States, where you have to have balloons and all that kind of stuff. But it just seems to be singing and laughing, and I've not been privileged to participate in dances other than an evening voodoo ceremony. So I can't tell you what Asian folk dancing is like. That drives me nuts. I love folk dancing.
What is Haitian voodoo?
Well,
what is that?
I'm no expert. I am not an expert.
does-
Okay, but voodoo, or called voodoo, is African folk beliefs, and in a time when you had no doctors, no knowledge of medicine, one would apply what you thought worked, as in spider webs to stop bleeding or something like that. And the people brought that folk knowledge with them to Haiti. There's also a religious component to it with the various gods and goddesses, which have kind of taken on the Catholic Church, and to some extent the Episcopal Church have been quite comfortable in having people continue their voodoo beliefs. And there's some, people are a little hazy about the difference between the Virgin Mary and Urzuli, the goddess of love. But and there are ceremonies, and there are a lot of folk beliefs. I've seen people with, somebody came in with their eyes caked with some kind of a white powder that had been put on. And she indeed had a severe eye infection, which blinded one eye, and but hey, it helped. She didn't blind her other eye, Or a man with back pain who had this elaborately knotted cord around his waist. And I asked him what it was for, and he said, it's to take the pain away. And I said, does it work? And he said, yes. And I said, then wear it.
Yeah, right.
Or a woman who had a string woven elaborately around 2 of her fingers to help something. And, or the fellow who came in because something was wrong with his ear. We found his ear was full of sugar, and our interpreters told us, because he said, have you ever seen anything like this? I said, it looks like sugar. So I asked the interpreter, and he says, well, he said, if you want the man to like you, you take this sugar and you put it in his ear when he's asleep. Okay. And so, there are a lot of folk beliefs, and I think they've said that Haiti is like 80% Catholic, and 20% evangelical, and 100% voodoo, because it is. And our interpreter, who has some education, has said, he said, voodoo is our heritage.
Right.
He says, Catholicism is my religion, but voodoo is our heritage. We are the sons of slaves. They're extremely proud that they are the first slave republic, the first successful slave rebellion, the second republic in the New World, or second republic in the world, I think. So they have a fairly proud, they have a proud history that they do look back on, and I think that probably gives them some hope for the future.
in the community up in the mountains, where do they bury people, or do they?
Yeah, you know, this is all rock up there. And so you see tombs that look like simplified versions of New Orleans tombs. And the dead person is buried very quickly, for obvious reasons. They're put into a little mausoleum and it's bricked up, and after X amount of time, then it's opened up and the bones are taken out and buried in a larger family mausoleum. In the mountains, they're very simple. As you get into Port-au-Prince and all that, there are funeral chapels and quite elaborate cemeteries. But it's very similar to New Orleans. New Orleans is, because the ground is so swampy up here, it's the ground, there just isn't a whole lot of depth that you could dig to.
What does your daughter do who lives in Haiti?
She did live in Haiti. She was hired by an American foundation that runs a maternity hospital and a child feeding program for children with kwashiorkor and severe malnutrition, and has a system of rural health clinics. They're based in the East, and they hadn't had an accountant. I mean, you know, hey, what's an accountant do in Haiti, right? So they hired her to kind of whip their accounting system into shape in Haiti. It took 2 years, but she did it. And she's back here now. Well, actually, she's in India right now. But, she
Doing
lives in the
similar
United States now.
work?
Pardon?
Doing similar accounting work?
No, she's doing accounting, but she works for John Deere now. She's back in the industrial complex now. But,
It's very interesting.
yeah.
Thank you.
So, you know, there's no one description that fits all of Haiti.
Right.
Just like they're like here, and you know, their politics are about as complicated as ours. They had an election within the last year or so, and I was privileged to listen to some of the debates around the kitchen table, in which the priest at this place was really for Mr. Celestine, because Mr. Celestine was from that area, and they thought good roads and other pork would come to them if Celestine. And the younger men were saying, how can you even think of it? He has, 17 children by 10 women, what kind of a man is this, and there was quite a, and then there was a Madame Monagat, and Monagat. Yeah, I guess it was Monagat. And she was the wife of a former dictator, and people didn't really want the former dictator. This is where Mr. Martley is the president, and people say they like him. So we'll see what happens.
Bravo.